The creation of the first atomic bomb is known as the Manhattan Project. The project involved superpower countries, renowned characters, and distinguished scientists, all united with two main purposes: to end World War II and create the bomb before the Nazis. Yet the Manhattan Project also inadvertently influenced many other factors, such as science and society, in ways that still impact us today. At the time the Manhattan Project was developed, World War II had many people worried. The Nazi scientific team had found a way to split the uranium atom, which produces the energy necessary to create a weapon of mass destruction. This threatened the entire world, for the Nazis were one step ahead of everyone else. An Italian scientist known as Enrico Fermi had also managed to produce an atomic fission of an uranium isotope in 1934. He then traveled to the United States in 1941 and joined Albert Einstein in the Uranium Committee, a title used to disguise the experiments that would compete against the Nazis. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union and took possession over its laboratories and equipment. This forced the Allied forces to speed up their research and come to a final decision of making the atomic bomb. But before that came a tedious and difficult process. On October 9, 1941, Vannevar Bush, the leading scientist in the scientific department, communicated to President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Vice President Henry A. Wallace that the making of the atomic bomb was feasible. His statement was backed by the British Maud Report and the National Academy of Sciences. Roosevelt then agreed to the creation of the bomb, granting aid from the Army, if needed, and plenty of financial support. Desperate to find the perfect bomb ingredient after much trial and error, the group of scientists led by Enrico Fermi searched for the best possible element. That element was uranium-235, a variation of uranium. However, uranium-235 represented two main setbacks. To begin with, it was extremely unstable and dangerous to handle. Second, the element was very rare and most of the time was found with uranium-238 atoms, which do not function the same way as uranium-235 atoms. Yet, knowing that the Germans were also racing to develop the atomic bomb and that the war's tide was unstable, the scientists decided to use uranium as the main ingredient for the bomb. Isotopes are atoms belonging to the same element. 4 ways of separating isotopes exist. During the project, scientists only used 3 methods. The first one was gaseous diffusion. In this method, chambers of pressured gas, scientifically known as uranium hexafluoride, push the element in a series of stages in order to filter the isotope 235 from 238, since both had different densities, but the filtering was not always accurate. The second method was electromagnetic separation, in which a spectrograph sends pressured uranium particles into an electromagnetic field, propelling different isotopes into different streams, but the quantities of filtered uranium were insufficient. The last method was the centrifuge, which was the most useful filter. In a sealed chamber, particles of UF6 were shot with abundant pressure into 2 different funnels, one having a larger vacuum than the other. Particles that are more dense were attracted to the funnel with the larger vacuum, while the less dense particles were attracted to the shorter vacuum. The scientists, however, used the 3 methods in order to produce a total of 64 kilograms, less than 1 kilogram fissioned.
And so between January and June of 1942, that's half a year. In January of 42, the Americans and Germans were pretty much tied as far as working on an atomic bomb. And by June of 1942, the Americans were way in front. By June of 42, the Americans got as far as the Germans did by the end of the war. And then, of course, the Americans continued working after June of 42. And the Americans, what did the Americans do what the Germans didn't do? Well, they dedicate almost tens of thousands of workers and scientists and engineers joining the American project.
In April of 1943, the work for designing Y-12 and X-10, which were codenames for the bombs, began in Los Alamos, New Mexico. At this location, the design for Fat Man was commenced. This bomb was composed of plutonium-239. This element behaved similarly to uranium-235 and was applied to the bomb testing at Trinity Site and in Fat Man, detonated in Nagasaki, Japan. On July 16, 1944, at 5:30 a.m., the first bomb was tested in Los Alamos Trinity Site, resulting in a positive sample. A year later, on August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was firebombed with Y-12, nicknamed Little Boy, resulting in 100,000 casualties. Then, Japan was bombed once again in Nagasaki with bomb X-10, nicknamed Fat Man, resulting in 83,000 casualties. However, the Axis alliance, composed of Germany, Italy, and Japan, had surrendered before the first bomb. So, why firebomb a nation that had already surrendered and killed 183,000 people using a formidable weapon? According to historian J. Samuel Walker, Truman decided to use the atomic bombs because of 5 main reasons.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire. No matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Various army generals objected to the bombs that were used to attack the Japanese. President Truman countered these objections by referring to the atrocities of Pearl Harbor and that when you have to deal with a beast, you have to treat him like a beast. Japan did surrender after the bombings, marking the official end of World War II. The next reason that the bombs were detonated lies in all the efforts and investments in the bombs, being an estimate of $1,889,604,000 by the end of 1945. It took the aid of thousands of engineers and officials and a vast amount of resources. The third reason was to end the war at the earliest possible moment. If the bombs had not been used, the number of casualties, including all countries involved, would have most likely increased and more resources would have been used. Truman assured that he only looked to end the war quickly, and that it did not matter whether the bombs were used or not. Following was the effect that the Americans wanted to impress the Soviet Union, with the purpose to approach the Soviets and threaten their control in Eastern Europe. Professor Gaddis Smith from Yale University quoted, "It has been demonstrated that the decision to bomb Japan was centrally connected to Truman's confrontational approach to the Soviet Union." The last reason for the usage of the bombs was that people and those who contributed to the making of the weapon wished for its usage. In fact, in 1944, the United States Army had already begun a firebombing campaign in several Japanese islands, killing around 300,000 people before the bombs were even detonated in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. One aspect that has affected the perspective of the Manhattan Project is the profound fear people had of an atomic bomb, commonly referred to by the American newspapers of the time as a little atom bomb. Many historians believe that the government of the United States itself seeded the fear society had of the bombings. According to Stephen Possany, economist and military strategist during the 1940s, the government transmitted filmings of the bombings on TV repeatedly, shared newspaper articles about the results of the atomic bomb, and hid the after effects of radiation. Later after the bombings, the Soviet Union began developing a similar weapon. Conflict was then born between the United States and the Soviets. This conflict came to be known as the Cold War, a period of 51 years, from 1947 to 1991, of constant threats between these two nations. During this time, societies questioned their safety and whether they could possibly die to a Soviet bomb. The government then took the decision in 1984 to create the Star Wars, or the Strategic Defense Initiative, which was an advanced system of anti-ballistic missiles in order to prevent bombings from enemy countries. But why does it matter to people in the 21st century? How does the story of the creation of a feared weapon affect history, and more specifically, us? The Manhattan Project had both positive and negative impacts throughout history. At first, it seemed like a negative twist in history, but it actually provided the world with many positive advancements. Some of these advancements are in the scientific area, such as discovering a new and more eco-friendly way to generate energy, known as nuclear energy. The Manhattan Project allowed the exchange of scientific ideas, theories, and experiments, the encounter of a new perspective of science, warfare, and weaponry, the exploration of a nuclear weapon that changed the course of history. It all started with a highly exclusive, top-secret idea. The intention of this idea was to end war and save lives, but it was converted into a method of revenge that ended up introducing a new age of fear and killing thousands. The Manhattan Project. More than just an explosion.